that we as scientists desperately need to be doing all the time is to talk to each other, find out what can I do to solve this problem. Because this, for example, this fluidic circuit board, this was done to solve a problem, but it was also sort of everyone talking and saying, I just can't work with this. And here's my problem, can we clamp down the lines, can we do this, what are these things? And brainstorming to come up with something neat like this, neat and organized, which really is also much more sterile too. We don't want to infect our organs in the lab. So one of the things that we're wanting to do this year is we want to hook up all of our organs. So we're developing a universal media that can be used for all of the organs. I know we all have blood in our bodies and that feeds all of our organs, but you can't take human blood and put it on cells or put it in organs and expect it to work. Unfortunately, that's because our blood cells have hemoglobin, and hemoglobin, when it's released from the blood cells, is toxic. So we're developing a media that is able to be used for all the organs. For the last 100 years, we've been developing media that's more and more specialized to feed these special cells, to feed lung cells, to feed liver cells, to feed heart cells, thinking that this is the answer. Well, we've become so specialized that now we can't get these cells to talk. So that's another project that we're working on, is trying to despecialize these medias so that we can use them to allow our organs to communicate. And I'm going to open it up to folks, because I think I would rather hear from you guys and see what you guys are interested in.
I have two questions. One, for a layman, could you possibly articulate what makes artificial organs grow differently in a rigid environment than a soft and squishy and spongy environment? And also the interdisciplinary approach that you're suggesting at the end of your talk here, who's involved in that? How's that going?
Okay, and I have to say that for some of these questions, I will have to come up with the truth, which is I don't know. We don't know exactly why mechanical forces on cells cause them to behave differently. I do know that, let's say you have vascular cells. If you give them flow, they will behave much more like vascular cells in the human body, because the human body, our cells, have flow. We don't know all of the signals. I know that if you go to a biology classroom, they'll probably have pictures of the cell with all these little arrows pointed and proteins on there. And that, to me, is very confusing, because we really don't know all of the signaling events going on in the cells and when they happen and why they happen. But we do know from trial and error that if we compress the liver cells, they maintain their ability to detoxify drugs. We do know that if we provide, say, an air-liquid interface to our lung cells, that they start behaving like lung cells, and they do make things like surfactant, which is, you might be familiar if you've had, or if you've known anybody who's had babies that were premature. They start making this surfactant at 36 weeks in the utero, and if they're born before that, the doctors actually have to apply surfactant. And we can get these cells to make surfactant just by giving them different mechanical stresses. So we don't know exactly what's going on. We just know from trial and error how that's working. When I say interdisciplinary, that was your second question.
Well, that's my word, not yours.
Oh, no. When you mentioned about our interdisciplinary nature, and I shouldn't say it's only Lanel, because we have had people from Harvard work on projects. So the heart module was developed by Harvard. The liver module was developed by Charité Universitätsmedizin in Berlin, and the lung was developed here at Lanel. So it's not just interdisciplinary, it is international. And we have people who are physicists, we have fluid dynamics people. I didn't do any of this. these guys, this whole team in the middle, and people in Europe, people in Boston. We had a lot of people that were involved in development of some of these organs, and we will continue to have a lot of people because this is, no one person can solve this. I'm not saying we're trying to be God here by creating organs, but it sure does, blow me away sometimes when I see how things come together when we work as a big family. Yes.
So that heart module you passed around, I understand you grow heart cells in there. Does that tissue provide any functionality, or are you relying on valves and pumps external to that module?
Yes and yes. So it does, the heart cells are, the heart cells that we get are adult-derived stem cells. They came from a grown-up person's skin, and they were then turned into stem cells, and then turned back into heart cells, or turned into heart cells. And they do beat, but they beat a bit weaker than our own heart, and they do need some stimuli. Some of the evidence is saying that if you provide these heart cells some flow, they're behaving more like normal heart cells in the body. And they do beat. They change their frequency when you give them different drugs. In the heart module, it is able, the cells are able to change their cardiac output, which is something that physicians measure. Are you healthy? Do you have enough cardiac output? Or is your heart causing problems? We do have artificial valves in there, so we still haven't solved all the problems. But there is a gentleman sitting just to your left who actually has, he did his PhD on growing heart valve cells, and which is a very challenging problem because heart valve cells don't grow on those hard dishes that I passed around. So I would encourage you, after we're all done here, to ask him a little bit about what he did. He just joined our team this week, and we thought he'd be a very valuable addition. Like I said, we don't have the heart valves. We have artificial valves in there.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So you use these artificial organs to test things, so you don't have to use real organs. And then do you benchmark them on real organs to see if you're getting the same sort of results or something equivalent?
So what we have been doing is we have been, and this actually, I apologize when I talked about all the teams we worked with, I failed to mention we also work with some modelers. And so we work with a lot of mathematical modelers. Most of our team is out of Huntsville, Alabama. Sometimes we work with folks in town as well on this issue. And what we do is we look at medical values. So in the literature, doctors have published, okay, this is what happens when we give a person, or when a person takes too much Tylenol. These are the blood values. We measure the media that is in our liver, and we look at the values in the media, and our modelers will plot the expected results from our organ based on what they have seen from the literature, from the medical reports. And then we'll see, oh, are we getting these values? Are we getting expected values, or will we need to extrapolate? For some organs, we may need to extrapolate. And then some organs, things are just dead on. And for example, we use Tylenol as a validation. For our liver, we use acetaminophen. Shouldn't say Tylenol, we use acetaminophen. Same brand name versus the actual chemical. And some interesting things we've seen, are combinatorial effects. I know we are all having a good glass of wine here, but when you go home, don't take a Tylenol. They do actually combine to cause a bigger effect. There's nothing wrong with Tylenol within its therapeutic window, but I prefer to actually keep those two drugs separate, the alcohol and the acetaminophen. And granted, acetaminophen is a Tylenol is a very valuable drug when used correctly, but overuse of it is very dangerous. Yes, sir.
So are you working in an intermediate step before organs are actually grown?
So what we are doing is we're not growing organs that would be used in a human body. There are people in this field who are doing this. Like I mentioned earlier with the stem cells from a grown-up's skin. That gives me hope that we can, in 15, 20 years, grow replacement organs for ourselves. This isn't, we're not trying to grow replacement organs, we're just trying to grow little miniature ones that can be used for testing pharmaceuticals. And I guess in science, everything is an intermediate step. We always, while we can grow these cells in these bioreactors, we do want to make it better and better and better every single time that we make a change to our organs. So in science, everything is an intermediate step, unfortunately. I think this gentleman, did you have a question? You looked like you had a question earlier. Yes, sir.
Could we hear from each of your team members a word or two about what is the biggest challenge they are facing and how they are qualified to meet it?
I would love that. That is a great question. Have y'all had enough wine? We're going to start with my grad student. She's the most outgoing, right?
So what was the question?
Or you can come up here if you want,
Oh, it's fine.
or just speak up. Okay.
It's fine.
What is the biggest challenge you are facing and how are you qualified to meet it?
The biggest challenge, we don't know how we can validate the cells are functional. So we want the cells to behave as they behave in vivo, right? Like in our body. So with having all these different parameters, we're trying to home them in new microfluidic systems. So sometimes we don't understand if their cells behaving functionally, are they deviating from what they're supposed to do. And I guess that's the biggest challenge right now. But by giving them what they see in our body, like that's what she mentioned, different mechanical stretch, flow, the stiffness of the substrate we're growing on, and the media, I think we can overcome that challenge, but it may take some more research.
Real-time monitoring would be great.
Yeah.
But what she, when she talks about how the cells, we don't know how the cells are behaving, sometimes you have to have an endpoint, which kills the organ. So you fix it with formaldehyde and you stain it to see, did the cells behave? Well, then you can't keep growing that same organ. So that is a challenge, and more real-time monitoring would be fantastic.
Yes, I guess incorporating some sensors and stuff to make it more advanced.
And what's your background to enable you to do this, approach this challenge?
Graduate student, yes.
Yes. Will work for food, right? Yeah.
I am trained in both bioengineering, and my background was in genetic engineering and biotechnology. So yeah, I'm working on both platforms.
Bioengineering
Yes.
and genetic engineering?
Yes.
Both?
So yeah, so my undergrad was in biotechnology and genetic engineering, and I did my master's in nanoscience and microsystems.
Nanoscience
Yes.
and microsystems.
Yes. So I got trained in like both platform, doing all the fab, making all the devices, and also understanding the biology.
Sounds very sophisticated.
Who else are you going to pick on now? Simone.
I heard a request for Simona.
I'm just a lowly post-bac student, so my background is not much. But I mean,
There's no such thing as a lowly student. I mean, students, yes, they are at the bottom of the totem pole, but we need you. We desperately need you.
I guess the biggest thing that I've struggled with is like reproducibility. So the cells that we're working with are primary cells, so they come, like Jennifer was talking about, from hosts, and so they are a little bit finicky to work with. So like you can sometimes run an experiment and it can all be working fine, and then you can rerun that experiment and then it all inexplicably fails. You're like, I thought I did everything the exact same, but the incubator temperature could have been off by like 1 degree Celsius, or it could be
Snowing outside.
or it's snowing outside and that just caused the cells to crash. Figuring out how to navigate that, and so we're looking into that.
Primary human cells are a real challenge. There's donor to donor variability, just like we're all different. And there's also a difference in, I guess, harvest. I don't want to ruin anyone's dinner here, but when there is sometimes a lag time between time of death and harvest of the cells. And so each of us, if you are on an organ donor list, like let's say you signed it with your driver's license, or if your family and you discuss that you'd like to be an organ donor, you can check a box on that form that says, I do or don't want my organs that didn't find a match to go to science. And that's where ours come from. So we're kind of last on the list, and that's the way it should be, because of the fact that organs need to go to people who need organs right now. So if I'm an organ donor, if, God forbid something happens, they would try to find a match for my liver. But let's say there was a spot on my liver, or nobody was a match for my liver. Then the companies that are able to take primary cells get dibs on those organs if the families say it's okay. And so that's where we purchase our cells from. And so sometimes there is a lag from time of death to harvest, and that affects greatly how some of these cells behave, because fresher cells are going to behave better. My cells are fresh now.
Keep using them.
Yes, I shall keep using them. Everybody drive safely home tonight. I don't want any of your organs. Yes, sir.
I assume that there are relatively easier organs and hard organs. What's the holy grail? What's the one you just can't reach?
The immune system. And the reason for that is because our immune systems develops both in utero and all the way up through the time that we're about 2 years old. And this is called the adaptive immune system that I'm talking about, which you might have heard of B and T cells. And these are the cells that go around looking to see, is this me or is this something else? And that's called self-recognition. And when it's self, the cells should be, the B and T cells move on. If it's not self, the B and T cells should attack these things. So that's how pathogens, that's how we defend our bodies against flu, colds, all these other things. And because this develops in a very complex manner in utero, and some of it also throughout our life, every time we get a shot for flu, that's continually developing. But that sense of me, not me, self, not self, is really a challenge to replicate. That there are people trying it, and we are interested in putting some white blood cells in, but not the ones that have learned, who am I? Because our organs are made from many different donors, and the risk is that, if you were to get an organ that is mismatched, your body would reject it. And the same thing would happen if we were to make an immune system with the knowledge we have today. I don't think it's impossible. I think we just haven't learned what we need to learn to get there. Yes.
So did you ever have the chance to create 2 or 3 different organ surrogates from the same donor and see how those performed versus 2 or 3 from another individual donor, so that you could see if that kind of was definitely leading performance in one way or another? Do you ever do that kind of thing?
We have not. I think it would be a neat opportunity if we could. But the likelihood of a mismatched lung, liver, heart, all these things coming from the same donor where the donor doesn't find a match. I mean, honestly, when somebody's an organ donor, those organs need to go to the people who need it, living people who need it.
But I thought I heard you say you were taking